Hi guys, we are back for Unit 12, Lesson 6. Today we're going to be using our metric units of length, so we're going to go back to measuring the length of an object. This time we're going to use the metric system. Now this first part of the activity says you're going to cut out stuff. You are not. I'm going to show you some stuff on a metric ruler, and then we're going to talk about how many of each measurement it takes to make the next. Okay, let's get started. So you're not going to cut out a meter stick strip. I have a meter stick right here. It's folded up right now. It's a pretty handy one that Miss Evans let me borrow. Okay. So we're actually going to start at the bottom of this. We're going to start with the 1 centimeter and work our way up to a meter. So it talks about 1 centimeter is equal to how many times as long as a milliliter. Okay, so if you look at my ruler here, you can see centimeter and you can see millimeter, mm. Okay, now if I took, the big numbers are centimeters, the big lines. Okay, all these little teeny tiny lines, those are millimeters. So if I took and counted from a 2 centimeter to the 3 centimeter, I could sit there and I could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 millimeters in a centimeter. So a centimeter is 10 times as long as a millimeter. Now, as you look on my ruler, you can kind of see the 10 and the 90 at the same time here. If you look at the 10 mark, there's another line that goes through it. Same thing with the 90. Keep going, the 20 and the 80, okay? That is our decimeter line, okay? Decimeter. So if we look, our next one says 1 decimeter is how many times as long as 1 centimeter. So we're looking at the bigger numbers now. So this line is right at the 10 centimeters. So it takes 10 centimeters to make a decimeter. Okay. And now if I unfold this fancy ruler Miss Edison gave me. Okay, you guys are seeing 1 centimeter there. Focus on the tens because it takes 10 centimeters to make a decimeter. We need to figure out how many of these decimeters, so these long lines that go through the numbers, make up 1 meter. So we're starting at the beginning. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 is right here where this little notch is. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So it takes 10 decimeters to make a meter. Okay. The nice part about metric units is that they use powers of 10. So you'll be multiplying by either 10, 100, or 1,000. So that's a whole lot of zeros that you just kind of get to forget about and do your multiplication at the beginning and attach them back on. Okay, it says describe the pattern you see. So what do we see in each one of these little spots? Good, we see that every single one of these is 10 times bigger than the other unit, well, the next smallest unit. Okay, so each measurement is 10 times bigger than the last. Our next question says, compare the size of 1 meter to the size of 1 centimeter. It's actually going back. Really nice how this folds up. You can see the beginning of my meter and the end of my meter all at one time. This all folds out. Then compare the size of this 1 centimeter to the whole meter stick. This would be the end of. How many centimeters are in 1 meter? Well, the last number I see here is 99, and then all the way to the end here would be one more. That would be, good, 100. So 1 meter is 100 times as long as 1 centimeter. It takes 100 centimeters to make this meter stick. Right, our next problem says, do the same thing, but talk about millimeters. So those little teeny tiny lines. So remember that it took 10 little teeny tiny lines to make 1 centimeter, okay? And now we're talking about, we just used 100 centimeters to make this meter stick. So if we did our 10 little tiny lines times our 100 centimeters, what would 10 times 100 be? Good, 1,000. So 1 meter is 1,000 times as long as 1 millimeter. Oops, 2,000. Okay, as 1 millimeter. Right. Our number 3 says, what operation could you use to find how many centimeters are in 3 meters? Explain. What operation have we used? Remember, our operations are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. What operation have we used to go between units of really anything that we've done in this chapter? How do we go from one unit to another? Good, we've multiplied. All we've really been doing is multiplication when we want to change from one size to another in our liquid volume, in our weight, in our length, all of those things, okay? So we want to use multiplication. So what operation could you use to find how many centimeters are in 3 meters? I could use multiplication. And then it says explain. Okay, and your explaining can be words, or your explaining can be some math that shows me you know what you're doing. So we're going from centimeters to how many centimeters are in 3 meters. Well, on the last page, we just said that 1 meter is 100 times as big as 1 centimeter. So that means it takes 100 centimeters to make a meter. So I'm going to multiply my meters by 100 to get my centimeters. Okay, so I have 3 meters. I want to multiply that by 100. What is 3 times 100? Okay, remember, we can cover up our zeros, do our simple math fact of 3 times 1, which is 3, and attach our zeros back on. Okay, so now I've done my math, so I would say that 3 meters equals 300 centimeters. All right. Our next section says you can use different metric units to describe the same length. For example, you could measure the length of a book as 3 decimeters or as 30 centimeters. Remember, there are 10 centimeters in every decimeter. Since the metric system is based on the number 10, decimals or fractions can be used to describe metric lengths as equivalent units. Think of 1 meter as 1 whole. Use your meter strip to write equivalent units as fractions and decimals. Okay. So it says 1 meter is equal to 10 decimeters, which we had seen when we looked at the big lines, right? 90 and then 100 at the end. So it would make 10 decimeters there. Now it says write that as a fraction and as a decimeter. So it says each decimeter. So if I was just talking about this first decimeter, what would that be out of a fraction of the 10 that I need to make a meter? If I was only talking about 1 out of 10, what would my fraction look like? Good, we should have 1/10. Okay. Now I want you to write that as a decimal. How do you write 1/10 as a decimal? Good, you should have 0.1. For the same thing, they want you to do this again, but using centimeters. So it took 100 centimeters to make 1 meter. So that is now our new denominator. And they want you to look at just 1 centimeter. So what would 1 centimeter look like as a fraction? So we should have 1 out of 100. And how would you write that as a decimal? Good, 0.01. Okay. Now it's giving us some other lengths here that it wants us to change into both decimals and fractions. Okay, so we just remember that if it's a centimeter, it's out of 100. If it's a decimeter, it's out of 10. Okay, so when I'm writing 51 centimeters, I'm writing 51 out of 100 pieces. What would that look like? 51 out of 100 pieces. How would I write this as a decimal? Zero 0.51. Excellent. All right. Our next one says 8 decimeters. Remember, it only takes 10 decimeters to make a meter. So now we're doing it out of 10. So we have 8 out of 10 decimeters. How would you write that as a fraction? We have 8 out of 10. Wonderful. All right. And then how would we write that as a decimal? Got 0.8. Okay. Our last one in this little section is 82 centimeters. Remember, it's 82 out of 100 centimeters that it takes. We would have 82 out of 100. How would we write that as a decimal? 0.82. Good. All right. So just like in the past, they have a nice little chart up here for you to show you all the different changes between the links in case you forget them. So it's right there for you. All right, so the first section just says complete. So make these true. So we want to know how many centimeters are in 2 meters. we remember there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. If we don't, it's right here as well. Okay, so if I was going to use this chart, I would say, okay, I have meters. I want to get to know how many centimeters in there. So I look for meters first, centimeters second. So here's 3 different meters. Look for the one that says centimeters. So 100 centimeters equals 1 meter. So now I know I'm multiplying by 100 to get my answer. So I would do 2 times 100, which is good, 200. Okay. My next one, I'm going from centimeters to millimeters. So if I looked at my chart, 1 centimeter equals 10 millimeters. So I would do my 3 centimeters times 10 to get my millimeters. How many millimeters do I have total? Wonderful, 30. All right, my next one says 5 decimeters is equal to how many centimeters? Okay, if you look at your chart, you have to do 1 decimeter is equal to 10 centimeters. So you would do 5 times 10, and 5 times 10 is 50. Excellent. So we have 50 centimeters. Excuse me. For our next one, they want us to use the skills we just used above to compare to lengths here. So we have 4 meters or 40 decimeters. So remember with these, you change the longer length into the smaller length. So I know that a meter is bigger than a decimeter. Okay. So I need to see how many decimeters make 1 meter. If I look at my chart, 1 meter is made by 10 decimeters. So I would do 4 times 10 to get 40. Wonderful. So 4 meters is the same thing as 40 decimeters. So what does that make these two? Excellent. Equal. I have 40 decimeters over here and 40 decimeters over here. Okay, for our next one, we're looking at centimeters to millimeters. If this 5 centimeters is greater than, less than, or equal to 5 millimeters. It's going to be greater than. Okay, if we remember, it takes 10 millimeters to make a centimeter, so we do 5 times 10, which makes 50 millimeters. I'm going to use the abbreviation. So if you look up here, they have abbreviations for you. A centimeter is cm, decimeter is dm, millimeter is an mm, and then a meter is just a plain m. This would have been decimeters, just so you know what we're changing it to. All right, for our next one, it says 6 decimeters is greater than, less than, or equal to 65 centimeters. Should have put less than. Remember that it takes 10 centimeters to make 1 decimeter, so I would have done 6 times 10, which equals 60 centimeters. So I had 60 centimeters or 65. 65 is bigger. All right, your next one says 7 meters is greater than, less than, or equal to 700 millimeters. Sorry, millimeters. You should have gotten greater than. Okay, so if we look, it takes 1,000 millimeters to make a meter. So you would do 7 times 1,000, which would be 7. Attach my 3 zeros, millimeters. So that's 7,000 or 700, and 7,000 is bigger. right? For your next section, we are changing the length they give us into fractions and decimals, remembering that if it is centimeters, it is out of 100. If it is decimeters, it is out of 10. So we would say this has 65 centimeters out of 100. How would you write that as a fraction and a decimal? 65 out of 100. But we would put 65 out of 100. And then to write that as a decimal, we would put 0.65. All right, our next one is 47 centimeters. Okay, so it's 47 centimeters out of 100. So how would you write 47 centimeters out of 100 as a fraction and a decimal? Wonderful. We would put 47 out of 100. And to change that into a decimal, we would put 0.47. All right, our next one says 9 decimeters. Remember, there's only 10 decimeters in a meter, so this is 9 out of 10 decimeters. How would you write 9 out of 10 decimeters as a fraction and as a decimal? Wonderful. You should have put 9 out of 10. Good. 9 out of 10. And then you should have put 0.9. Okay. For number 11, it says 2 decimeters. So remember that's 2 out of 10 decimeters. How would you write that as a fraction and as a decimal? Two out of 10. S. 2 out of 10. And to write that as a decimal, 0.2. All right. Our next one says Lucille runs the 50-meter dash in her track meet. How many decimeters long is the race? So we're changing our 50 meters into decimeters. Okay. If I don't remember, I can go back up to my chart and say how many decimeters are in 1 meter. So I look, there are 10 in 1, so that means I need to multiply my meters by 10. So I would have 50 meters times my 10 to get me my total decimeters. Okay, so remember that we can cover up our zeros with our magic fingers. Then I see 5 times 1. Wonderful, it's 5. And then I'm going to uncover those with my magic finger and pencil. And I have 2 zeros in my problem, so I need to attach my 2 zeros in my answer. So it would be 500 decimeters. Okay. Our next one says Alexis is knitting a blanket 2 meters long. Every 2 decimeters, she changes the color of yarn to make stripes. How many stripes will the blanket have? Explain. Okay. So we have 2 meters long, and then we have some decimeters here that we got to worry about too. So we need to know how many decimeters are in a meter first, or in our 2 meters. So we just found out that there's 10 in every decimeter. So we have there's 10 decimeters in every meter. We have 2 meters, so we need to multiply it by our 10 to get how many decimeters we have. So we have 2 times 10 equals 20 decimeters. Okay, that was our 2 meters times 10 to make our 20 decimeters. Now it says that every 2 decimeters, she's going to change the color. So this question is basically asking you how many times is she going to change that color? Well, now I have 20 decimeters, and they say every 2, she is going to change the color. So you can take your 20 and divide by 2. So how many times does 2 go into 2? Good. 1 time. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. Bring down my 0. Can a 2 make a 0? No. So I just put a 0 up top. So she's going to change the color or make stripes 10 times. Or there would be 10 stripes. Okay. So there would be 10 stripes. And all your explaining is done right over here where you did all your math work. Our next page. Number 14 says, Julianne's desk is 75 centimeters long. She says her desk is 7.5 meters long. Describe her error. That doesn't sound right because remember it takes 100 centimeters to make 1 meter. And what she's saying here with her decimal is that there are 7 whole meters and then a half a meter. She's saying there's 7.5 meters for her desk length. Do you think her desk is that long? No. Okay. She's saying it's 75 centimeters, which would be 75 out of 100. Okay. So we need to prove that in our answer. So 75 centimeters is equal to what as a fraction? Sorry, should I change this equal sign? So 75 centimeters is what in fraction form? What would my fraction look like if I was saying 75 centimeters? Remember that's 75 out of 100. But it should be 75 out of 100. Now, we got to prove that this is not correct in decimal form. Right now we have fraction form, so I need to make it into a decimal. So 75 centimeters is 75 out of 100, which is equal to what decimal? What should my decimal be? Excellent, 0.75. Okay, so 75 100ths is equal to 0.75, not what she wrote, which is 7.5. All right, our next one is going to take a little bit of work in here. So we need to take all these measurements and put them into the correct column. Okay, the first one we're going to start with is our 5 meters. Okay, so remember there are 3 things that can make up a meter. There are millimeters, there are centimeters, and there are decimeters. Okay, so we'll start with the biggest one and work our way down. So decimeters, remember every jump we take, we're doing it by 10 more. So meters to decimeters is multiplying by 10. So I would do 5 times 10 is, great, 50. I'm looking for 50 decimeters. Is it up there? Yes, it is. It's right here. Okay, so I'm going to cross it out. I'm going to put it here, 50 decimeters. I'm going to use the abbreviations. It'll make it a little bit easier in our boxes. Okay. When I go to centimeters, remember there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. So we would do 100 times 5. Great, it's 500. So I'm looking for 500 centimeters. Do you see 500 centimeters? Wonderful, right here. 500 centimeters. Okay, then I'm looking for millimeters. Okay, and remember there are 1,000 millimeters in 1 meter. So we would do 5 times 1,000. And we would get 5,000. Great, guys. So do we see 5,000 millimeters up there? right here. Right. So we got that one done, right? We got decimeters, centimeters, millimeters. Those are the only things that can make up that meter. Now when we move on to centimeters, we can go either way. We can talk about how many millimeters make up this centimeter, or how these centimeters compare to meters, okay? So first, as I look up here, I'm gonna look at my meters. So the meters I have left is I have some meters out of fractions here, and I have some meter decimals here, okay? So the first thing I wanna do is change my centimeters into a fraction. What does 55 centimeters look like as a fraction? Remember, it takes 100 centimeters to make a meter. Excellent. So 55 out of 100, which is right here. 55 out of 100 meters. Okay. Now we can also write this fraction as a decimal. How would we write 55 out of 100 as a decimal? Wonderful. 0.55, which is right here, meters. Okay. Now, as I look at what's left, I have some more meters, but these are out of 1,000, and I only need 100 centimeters to make a meter, so that's not it. This decimal is also out of 1,000, which we don't normally do in fourth grade, but it's just showing you for the metric system. So then I have millimeters and centimeters. Well, 55 centimeters isn't equal to 50 centimeters. So this one has to work, right? And we can check that by saying, well, there are 10 millimeters in a centimeter. So 10 times 55 would make 550. Remember, sometimes they give you answers in these that do not fit in a category, so you have to check them all. Okay, so now we're looking at 500 millimeters. Remembering that 1,000 millimeters make a meter, how would we write 500 out of 1,000 as a fraction? Right, we would do 500 out of 1,000. Okay, and like I just told you on the last one, this one here in the middle is actually to the thousands place. So we have tenths, hundreds, thousands, just like we do in our normal numbers. So this is actually 5,000, which is what we just wrote here in fraction form. Okay, and the last one, we just have to check to make sure that it'll fit into our box before we put it there. So it says that 50 centimeters would be equal to 500 meters. Okay, so check that. We can take our 50 centimeters. We know that it takes 10, sorry, I said meters. We have 50 centimeters, and we need to see if it's equal to 500 millimeters. So we say there are 10 millimeters that make 50 centimeters. So that wrong too. Sorry, guys. There are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. So we would have to multiply 50 times 10. What is 50 times 10? Great, it would be 500. So 50 centimeters does work in this box. Sorry, I'm getting some tongue twisters in there. All right, the next one says, Avruna was writing a report on pecan trees. She made the table of information to the right. Write a problem that can be solved using the data. Okay. I also want you to look at this bottom part here, this second question, because it goes along with it. It says, describe how you could change the problem by changing the units in the problem to solve the problem. So we have to do one type of unit first, and then be able to change it to another type of unit in our second part of our problem here. So as we look at our chart, I want to find a measurement that I can change to at least two other types of metric units. So the first one I see is a centimeter. Okay, so a centimeter can be changed to millimeters, okay, by multiplying by 10. So I could do something that involves that. But then for the second part, I would have to change it to another one. And to be able to change it to another one, I would have to be able to almost divide it by 10. And I can't divide these two numbers by 10. 3 and 5, they're prime numbers. They can't go any smaller. So I'm not going to talk about the length of that. So as I go to the next one, I see these are out of meters. And I know from my problems here, I can change meters into decimeters, into centimeters, into millimeters. So decimeters is a really good one to use. So I can use height, the height of a pecan tree. Okay. As I look at the next one, I have decimeters. Well, decimeters can be turned into centimeters or turned into millimeters. So that one would also be a great one to use for a problem. Okay, and then when I look again, I have centimeters here, but this one's a little bit different, right? I could change these into millimeters and go smaller. I could also divide both of these numbers by 10 to change them into a decimeter. So any of these last three would definitely work to make a problem that can be changed into two different measurements. So I'm going to challenge you to make your own problem, okay, to make your own problem. So pause the video right here, make your own problem and solve it, and then come back and I'll have my own. All right, so this is my question I came up with. What is the width? So I'm using this data right here. The width of a pecan trunk in centimeters. So right now they gave it to me in decimeters. I want to change it to centimeters. And then I need to solve my own problem. So I have 18 decimeters. Okay. I know that I need to multiply this by 10 because there are 10 centimeters in a decimeter to get how many centimeters it is. So 18 times 10, cover my 0, 18 times 1 is 18, and attach my 0 back on, so 180 centimeters. Now for the second part down here, it says, how could you change the problem? By changing the units in the problem. So I could change the units to millimeters. Okay, and then it says, then solve the problem again. So I still have 18 decimeters. Okay, now to figure out how much I need to multiply by, I can go back to my little chart here. Okay, so I know that there are 10 centimeters in a decimeter, and then there are 10 millimeters per 1 centimeter. So I would do 10 times my 10 centimeters to get 100. So a decimeter is 100 millimeters. Okay, so I have 18 times 100 now. Cover up my 2 zeros. 18 times 1 is still 18. Attach my 2 zeros, and I have 1800 millimeters. Okay. Alrighty, and that is it for our metric unit of length lesson. You guys have math homework to work on for our Zoom meeting. Please have your answers ready. I like to see all the hands going on. All right, so for your top ones, you're just completing the statement. Make it true. So how many millimeters are in 8 centimeters? how many decimeters are inside meters, so on and so forth. Your second section, you have to compare. So remember, you're going to change the bigger unit of measurement into the smaller. So when I'm looking at 8 meters or 80 centimeters, I'm going to change my meters into centimeters. And how to do that is figuring out how many centimeters are in a meter and multiplying this by that. Your third section, you are changing the amount they gave you into a fraction and a decimal. Remember that centimeters, there are 100 centimeters in a meter, so you have to do it out of 100. And for decimeters, there are 10 decimeters in a meter, so you're doing it out of 10. For number 14 and 15, you got some problem solving here. So it says a flagpole is 4 meters tall. How many centimeters tall is that? So changing your meters into centimeters. Same thing over here. A new building is 5 meters tall. How many decimeters is that? On the back, same kind of thing for the top two there, changing from one metric length, unit of length to another. On your review, number 3 says Bruce reads for 3.5 hours each night. How long would he read for 4 nights? So taking your 4 nights, multiplying by your 3/4 of an hour. Number 4 says Mark jogged 6/10 of a mile. Caroline jogged for 49/100 of a mile. Write an inequality to compare. So remember, an inequality is just using those greater than, less than, equal than. So put 1 on one side, the circle, 1 on the other side. Which one is bigger? For 5 and 6, you're going to use a line plot that we just learned about in our last one. So how many lawns were mowed? This is talking about totals. Okay, how many lawns were mowed total? Okay, and remember when we do that, we have to match up our fractions to make whole fractions. So we got to make 8/8 out of these fractions that we have here. Or you can add them all up 1 by 1 by 1. So like put 1/8 plus 2/8 plus 2/8 plus 2/8 plus 2/8 plus 3/8 plus 3/8 plus 4/8 plus 4/8 plus 4/8 plus 5/8, and add them all up and then simplify them. Okay. And then what is the difference between the greatest and the least amount of lawns mowed? We've done that several times as well. Alrighty guys, that is it for us. I will see you at 2:20 for our Zoom meeting.